Sign up for membership on theyoungturks.com and get the whole 3-hour show plus an uncensored postgame.
Looks like another love TKO.
Welcome to the Young Turks. I love this show. You know what we're going to do today? I know. I'm a bad man. I'm going to rip some people apart. Oh, if you like to see that, you're going to enjoy today's show. Batter up, Sarah Palin. Okay, hold up. You know who else is coming next? I don't know if a lot of you remember this fella. We've talked about him a lot. But it was back in the day. I gave you an appetizer a couple of days ago. Harold Ford Jr. gets destroyed on today's program. I didn't want to do it, but he made me. Destruction coming his way. JR.
Before you get to the destruction, I just want to, this is totally off topic, so I might as well do it now. That first song was Teddy Pendergrass, Love TKO. He's just died last night.
Shut up, really?
One of the greatest. He died, yeah.
How come I didn't see that? That's crazy. That's negligent on my part.
It's totally negligent. I have a couple tributes to him as the next hour and a half goes on, okay? So just be warned. You know, I read up on him a little bit. They don't give me too much information. I'm still getting more stuff. I want to see something crazy happen in his life. But it was colon cancer. He had some surgery a couple years ago and never fully recovered from that surgery. So he just died yesterday. All
right, and tell us a little bit about him. What kind of music did he do? Was he light-skinned African-American or a dark-skinned African-American?
Yeah, so he probably would have had to get one over by Obama with the darker-skinned African-American.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, soul R&B singer. You know, he was around the 70s, 80s, a little bit of the 80s, but mostly he was 70s soul singing. And even if people don't know who he was, they know his music. You heard him before.
Of course. And by the way, it's a perfect one to start out with because we've got a couple of TKOs coming up in this show. All right, now, before I do all that stuff, and we're going to do Rush Limbaugh in a second, right, because he's related to Haiti, but I got to start with Haiti. So, of course, the destruction is obviously devastating. You've seen all the pictures and the video probably online and on TV, et cetera. The numbers, thank God, are a little better than they were yesterday, even though some of the footage is worse because we're getting more and more footage in, right? And they say that the number of people who died, and it's a real loose number now because there's still so many people buried to this moment, right, within the rubble. We don't know how many are dead. We don't know how many are alive. And there's very loose numbers on the number missing. But right now, the estimate is the number of people killed is between 40 to 50,000. That's still a gigantic number, okay? And aid is pouring in. They've now canceled civilian flights to Haiti because the airport is overloaded with obviously food coming in and supplies, et cetera. But one of the things I found interesting in this effort is that's it. The United States has taken over. Like the local leadership of Haiti, I don't want to say they're missing in action, but not a lot of people have seen them, right? And apparently their president is fairly low-key. I think there's bounds of reason to how low-key you can be. I mean, they say, oh, yeah, he gives a couple of statements and gives into a couple of media requests. You just lost 40 to 50,000 people. This isn't about how much you like media or don't like media. You got to get out there and tell people what to do. You go this way, you go that way. Because you got to understand, look, remember the logistics of this is so difficult. Number one, and this is gruesome stuff, you're pulling out the dead bodies from the buildings, and they're laying them right next to the buildings. And it's 81-degree heat there. And if you leave the bodies there for a long time, infectious disease is going to start to spread, like crazy. It's going to be rampant. So then you're trying to figure out where to bury the bodies, but the cemeteries aren't large enough for all these bodies at the same time. So then people started digging shallow graves on top of hills. Some people don't want to bury people yet because of certain voodoo rituals you have to do, quite literally, before you bury them. Now, that's their religion. You like, you don't like, but that's something that they take very, very seriously, obviously. So now you got all these festering bodies, and then you still have all these people trapped in the rubble. They pulled out an 11-year-old girl earlier today. They're still pulling out people. And one of the people that they pulled out, he said, oh, yeah, there's still people underneath me. And I don't know how many of them died and I don't know how many of them are still alive. They're trying to remove the rubble with their hands, but we're getting the equipment in there. But you got to coordinate all this. What do you do with, what do you prioritize? How do you get them food and water? People are having trouble finding water. How do you prevent disease? How do you prevent crime in the middle of, the police force being devastated and the army being devastated? Who gets to land in the airports? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's a gigantic undertaking. I'm not sure who's supposed to step in and say, okay, I got it, but somebody's got to organize it, right? So in the midst of that, what I find to be interesting is Southern Command, United States military, Southern Command is like, yeah, I got it from here, okay? I don't know if that's because they're filling a void. Now, that's a rough sense I'm getting from the media on it, and I don't doubt that. I'm not saying the media's spinning it in a way that doesn't make sense to me. It does make a little bit of sense given the situation in it. And don't get the situation wrong. The military is saying, hey, listen, man, and the United States is saying, we're not taking over Haiti. We have no interest, okay? It's just somebody's got to coordinate this stuff. And obviously, Haiti's close to the U.S. It's within our sphere of influence. And it's not like we're going to let China lead. So we're the guys to do it. Now, I hope that, we're helping. I'm positive we are. But I hope we're doing it in the most effective way possible. And I don't want to say that so that we can judge later, et cetera, because it's not something you necessarily plan for. But maybe we should in the future. Because if we know that a country that closest to us that is that impoverished is going to have a disaster like this, realistically, we might have to step in more. But, if the guy at Southern Command didn't have the plans for that now, I don't blame him. I think that they're all doing the best they can. So from what we've seen so far, thank God they're down there. And so we've got, of course, an absolute mess on our hands and trying to figure out the best way to do it. And I don't envy the people on the ground there trying to figure it out. And by the way, in the airport, the tower collapsed. So the main tower collapsed, and so the U.S. military had to find another building at the end of the runway and take that over and start using that as a tower. Then they got to tell what planes can come in and what can't. A lot of the planes couldn't fly back out because there's no fuel left. So, I mean, it's a logistical nightmare, understandably so. And, of course, the quicker they can organize aid getting in, the more people they can save from the rubble and more people they can save from disease as well. And that's very, very important because that could spread, like I said earlier, very easily and spread wide. Now, let's talk about aid a little bit. How's that working? Okay, now, number one, a lot of people have done responsible things like setting up ways to get aid to Haiti in a way that you can trust. The White House is doing it. Rush Limbaugh, we're going to get to in a second, thinks that's some sort of devious plot. And Red Cross, and the list goes on of legitimate organizations that do this on a regular basis. Obviously, you got to watch out for the hucksters, as I said yesterday, and the number one huckster in the world is Pat Robertson. So don't do it through that. You want to do it through your local church, and you trust your church, of course, right? But don't do it through one of these, televangelist charlatans. So now the amount of aid going in appears to be in the neighborhood of $100 million. So that's not bad in relief funds, and that's just official funds, let alone the charity that's going to come in. So it's nice to see in some ways the world getting together because China's sending supplies, Britain is, Europe is, etc. Venezuela, Cuba, Latin America, communist countries, capitalist countries, etc. Everybody trying to send in help. And that's, a slight silver lining here to see the world unite like that a little bit is a nice thing to see, So I'm trying to look at the upside of that, but, there isn't much upside here with so many people dead. And then one other thing I wanted to mention from yesterday's show, I said, there might be some looting, et cetera. What's amazing about this, which is also slightly heartwarming, I mean, I know this is kind of twisted in some ways, but first of all, the looting is not bad at all, okay? And why is there looting when stuff like this happens? If you listen to Republican talk shows, they'll say, yeah, you know how those people are, the first opportunity, right? No, the reality is sometimes there's looting because there's no supplies. Nobody can get water, and the trucks haven't come in yet. There's no organization, so people are hungry. People need drinks, right? And in this case, apparently, only the stores that have collapsed are the ones that people are going into and taking supplies from. If the store is fine, they leave it alone. So because they're thinking it's open and we need water and food around here. So far, if the media reports on it are right, that's also, in some ways, heartwarming that that's the right way to do it, at least. I mean, what are you going to tell people? No, don't get that bread for your family in the middle of this crisis, thief. Okay, no, bounds of reason. Now, obviously, once you got order, then of course regular rules go back to applying. So it's a fascinating case study in what happens when society breaks down, not society, but order breaks down in one country, and how other countries are helping and establishing order as well, and trying to help people. So obviously a big news story. Now we go to the predictable conservative nonsense about Haiti. And that's obviously going to lead us to Rush Limbaugh. Yesterday we shared a clip with you where he thinks that, he thinks that Obama is excited that this is a great opportunity for him, and that he can appeal to light-skinned and dark-skinned African Americans here, and that shore up his base of support. I mean, just nonsense, right? So today the nonsense continues. He's got a conspiracy theory about how Obama's raising money for Haitian relief, and then he does a terrible thing of telling you to not donate to Haitian relief. All right, watch.
Dittos. My question is, why did Obama, in the soundbite you played earlier, when he's talking about if you wanted to donate some money, you can go to whitehouse.gov to be directed, to direct you how to do so. Why would, if I want to donate money to the Red Cross, why do I need to go to the whitehouse.gov page and look at that propaganda?
Exactly. Would you trust that the money is going to go to Haiti?
No.
But would you trust that your name's going to end up on a mailing list for the Obama people to start asking you for campaign donations for him and other causes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely right.
That's the point.
Besides, we've already donated to Haiti. It's called the U.S. income tax.
Rush, my mother was going to be on a missionary trip. She was going to leave at 4:30 this morning to go to Haiti.
From
our church.
That's another point, too. Churches.
No government money, Rush.
There are people, exactly right. There are people that do charitable work every day in Haiti. It's not as though, like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it's our fault. Reverend Wright, it's our fault. There's no excuse for such poverty when there's a nation as rich as we are so close. There are people that have been trying to save Haiti just as we're trying to save Africa. You just can't keep throwing money at it because the dictatorships there just take it all. They don't spread it around. And even if they did, you're not creating a permanent system where people can provide for themselves. It's a simple matter of self-reliance. Nobody takes that approach down there because this has always been a country run by dictators and incompetent ones at...
It's funny how they do the projection, right? They know the scams that they run, like people like Pat Robertson on the conservative side, who take the money and don't really necessarily give it to the people who are suffering from these tragedies, as he did in Rwanda, Pat Robertson did, and as he's likely to do in Haiti. So Rush assumes that Obama's going to do the same thing, that he's not, oh yeah, if you give to the White House, you think they're going to give it to the charity? They're going to steal it? You think that's the way they're going to go? I mean, what an insane conspiracy theory. Do you know how quickly they would get caught? And that would be the end of the presidency. I mean, come on. You can't possibly believe that. What he's trying to do is make sure you don't donate money to Haiti. Don't give it through the White House website. They'll capture your emails. Okay. And by the way, we shouldn't give any money apparently through the United States government because we already paid federal income tax. We already gave Haiti too much money. Those poor people, they don't know how to take care of themselves. But funny that it wasn't just poor people. The only other example he used of poor countries was led by dictators was, Africa. Yeah, I'm positive it's a coincidence. But he made a good point. We shouldn't keep giving U.S. government money to people who are not self-reliant, like the gigantic United States banks and Wall Street. Oh, they don't have to be self-reliant, right? We can shovel all that money to them, but they're not like African or Haiti dictators over there. Come on. Haven't we given enough to the poor already? He's actively trying to discourage you from giving in every way possible. Then he says, look, the churches do good work. Just give to the... But he doesn't even say give to the churches. That's the amazing thing, right? He's right. Some churches do great work, and God bless them for it, And those are great places to give, right? If you know your church, you trust your church, and you know it's going there, great, okay? But he says it as if, like, you don't worry, you don't have to give anymore, because the church has got it. Yeah, churches are giving. Yeah. Come on, we already gave through the income tax. The churches are on top of it anyway. What are we going to give to these black dictators? I mean, Haitian and African. I don't know. What, did I say something? Now, he's a really bad guy. I mean, how many times do I have to say it, right? I mean, you not get it? And that's the thing I find amazing about conservatives. Like, do they understand that they're the bad guys? Like, do they listen to that and go like, yeah, damn Haitians, yeah, they're 50,000 dead, who cares? I'm not getting any more money. We already gave enough to those damn Haitians. Like, when that goes through your head, do you understand that you're an asshole? Or do you think, like, I'm the good guy? I don't know. Like, I'm curious. I really do. Like, how do they justify it? Because everybody thinks they're the good guy, right? In their own head. How do they justify it to themselves? Now, I'm not saying it about the caller, because he says, you know, his mom is going through the church to help, etc. That's fine, man. Help any way you like, okay? I got no problems with that. I got a problem with Rush Limbaugh, who's actively trying to discourage everybody from helping and blaming some weird conspiracy theory on the Obama administration because he doesn't have an off button on asshole. So he's just, you know, no, Obama's wrong. On what? I don't know. Yeah, he's going to take your emails. All right, enough with Rush. All right, one more quick thing on hurricane and giving. So Huffington Post has a good, who is it who did it for him? Laura Bassett over at Huffington Post has a good article, interesting article, about how credit card companies take about 3% of the money you send with your credit cards in donations in crises like Haiti and in all donations. Now that's an average because sometimes for some situations they bring it down to like 2.15%, sometimes it's higher, et cetera, right? And people are saying, hey, maybe this is not the time to make all that money off of people donating to this, you know, cause and to trying to make the people of Haiti get better. Only 97% of the money goes there, 3% goes to the banks. Now, I have mixed feelings on that. Look, when the banks take our money, I go live it, right? But you have to understand, and when the credit cards jack up your rates when you didn't do anything wrong, it's outrageous, right? But it is a normal part of the credit card business to charge whatever organization anywhere from 2 to 5%, right? And they negotiate that for the service they provide. And it is a service they provide because otherwise getting the money to these or charitable organizations is very, very difficult without credit cards. So now, would it make sense if the credit card company said, hey, look, this is such a disaster, as some did, including American Express during the tsunami, to say this is such a disaster, we're not going to charge that normal rate, so 100% of your money goes towards these charities. I think that they would be smart to go in that direction, especially at this juncture, for good publicity, okay? And if you're just looking at it from a business perspective and not even a human perspective, if you're inside that company, that's good business, okay, to earn some credibility and trust with the American people, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, the credit card companies are saying, hell no, we're keeping the money. Okay. Now, but I don't, somebody mentioned at the end of our article, one of the people that she interviewed said, hey, maybe we should do legislation on this. No. I don't agree with legislation on this. No, look, it's the part of their business model. If they want to charge for charity like they charge for regular businesses, that's fine, okay? And then don't get me wrong, the credit card companies had a nonsense argument too. They said, well, look, if we start giving it away to the charities, then, you know, Walmart's going to want to renegotiate. But Walmart always wants to renegotiate. That has nothing to do with it. You think Walmart didn't try to drive the best bargain they could already with the credit card companies? And now that because of how you're treating charity, they're going to change? No, that's nonsense, right? But I don't think that this is something that you legislate. They're providing a service, and if you legislate, they might not provide that service anymore. So that's part of their core business, and I don't have a problem with it. I'm just trying to keep everything fair here, okay? All right, now when we come back, the destruction of Palin and Ford begins. Young Turks. Back on the Young Turks. All right, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start with Harold Ford, lay a path of destruction, and then move on to Sarah Palin, okay? This segment, path of destruction. All right, now Harold Ford Jr. is a guy who ran for senator in Tennessee, of course. He was a congressman in Tennessee. He took his dad's old seat. And so he's been around a while. He's was part of the Democratic Leadership Council, and so he is a conservative Democrat, what I call a corporatist Democrat. He's almost a perfect example of it. He went and worked for Merrill Lynch after he lost the Senate bid in Tennessee, and now he's in New York, and all of a sudden he's decided, you know what, why don't I challenge Kirsten Gillibrand in New York in a primary. Now, normally, the Democratic primaries I find are interesting. Some make sense, some don't. But when you challenge someone from the left, that usually pulls them more to a progressive position. So overall, I'm pretty happy with primaries. Except Harold Ford is not going to run from the left. He's running to the right of Kirsten Gillibrand. And Gillibrand earlier was accused of being too far right to begin with, for a Democrat, especially from New York. Now, I'm not the only one that shares this concern. Brave New Films put together a little compilation to give you a sense of what Harold Ford Jr. is all about. Let's watch that first, and then I come back, and I'm going to tell you some facts about Harold Ford that you are not going to like. Let's watch.
Well, Tennesseans will get Jesus-loving, gun-supporting believer the family should come first, taxes should be lowered.
Ann Coulter, in fact, has called you her favorite Democrat.
Oops.
I ain't knocked nobody over to see President Bush. He's my friend. He calls me 40, and I call him my president.
Harold Ford Jr. is pro-gun.
I joined the NRA because I believe every American man and woman has the right to defend themselves and their loved ones. And just because you're outside your home, it doesn't mean you give up your right to protect yourself.
Anti-choice.
I voted for parental notification. I'm pro-life, Tucker. So, I mean, I don't run from that. I was not pro-choice at one time. How come your party hadn't offered a legislation in the Congress or the Senate to outlaw abortions? We could have done this.
Well, first of all, wait. First off, it's not my party.
We're going to teach people the difference between right and wrong.
You sound like you're moving right. Congressman, are you moving right?
You oppose same-sex marriage.
You support the president's call for a constitutional amendment to ban marriage between gays.
Blue Dog.
I'm Harold Ford Jr., and to get control of our borders, we've got to get tough on illegals.
Harold Ford Jr. is a bank executive millionaire. Who favors the rich.
6 years ago, I voted for the biggest tax cut the country had ever seen since 1981.
And he's taking his beliefs to the Empire State.
I hope that we can pass a military tribunal. I'm closer to where President Bush is on this, as I am on wiretapping as well.
Okay, you're in favor of the NSA warrantless wiretapping.
Absolutely. Two, I no longer work for Fox News. I did for about a year. And I have great respect and admiration for former colleagues there and a person.
You say the Ten Commandments should be posted in courtrooms around the state. You favor school prayer. You say you're pro-life. You want an anti-flag burning constitutional amendment. Are you going to vote with the Democratic caucus if you get into the Senate?
Are you now, or have you ever been, a liberal?
Yeah, I only love the ending of that. All right. Now, look, is Harold Ford Jr. much more conservative than your average Democrat? Absolutely. I mean, military tribunals that Bush set up, he was in favor of. Warrantless wiretapping, Bush calls him 40. And he's proud of that, right? Now, don't get me wrong. He was running in Tennessee. I get that he's got to be a little bit more conservative. That's not my main problem with him. First of all, you have to understand, on the issues, I would never vote for Harold Ford Jr. You come to me and tell me you like the military tribunals and warrantless wiretapping, and you're proud of passing the largest tax cut in history, which wound up devastating our economy. I got no interest in voting for you. But my larger problem with Harold is he's a fraud, okay, to put it bluntly. So let's break it down. Here's an interview he did with the New York Times a couple of days ago, and the title is Senate Hopeful in New State Airs Evolving Views. His views are evolving. First, he's going to pretend that he's from the New York area. The New York Times described him as, it says at one point, despite his Tennessee roots, an intermittent Southern accent. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes the guy has a Southern accent, sometimes he doesn't. It depends on the room he's in. It smells of politician, right? Then we go further, and these are just some cute ones. We're starting off soft here. When asked about what his favorite baseball team is, he pulled the classic Hillary running for New York Senate answer. Oh, always been a Yankees fan. Really? When you were in Tennessee, you were a Yankees fan. Look, just say it, man. Just say, hey, you know what? I grew up in Tennessee, or you know what? I went to school in Philadelphia. I'm a Phillies fan. Whatever. Nobody cares. They're going to be a lot more annoyed if you pretend that you're a Yankees fan your whole life than if you just say the truth. Sports fans respect that, but these people aren't real. They've never met a real person in their life, it seems like. All right, you're going to see why in a second. Much more of that. But no, to be fair to him, he's been in New York for a long time. Mr. Ford has officially been a resident of the state only since 2009. I don't know if you know this, but 2009 was a month ago. Okay, now it might have been earlier in 2009. He did not vote in November's mayoral election. Now that was 3 months ago. Okay, he didn't even vote in the New York elections. He still has a Tennessee's driver's license. And then, of course, he says, quote, New York has in many ways become home. Okay, look, people go to New York and run. Robert Kennedy did it. Hillary Clinton did it, and people accepted it. Just don't be so obvious with what a fake you are. Now, let's get to the relevant portions of how that might affect things. So let's go to the policy, right? Because, he appears to have evolving views, as the title says. Now, it's one thing if you have views I don't agree with. It's another thing if you BS me. So here we go. He says that, first of all, to be fair, he's conservative on this. He says Gillibrand was wrong on the health care overhaul. It's too liberal, and he's against it. Okay, if you think the health care overhaul is too progressive, okay, then you vote for Harold Ford Jr. in New York, okay? But the switches are what bother me, so let's go to those. In 2006, he said, quote, I oppose gay marriage. Could it be any clearer? Okay, he came out in favor of a resolution in Tennessee opposing gay marriage in 2006, not that long ago. But in the interview, he said, this is a quote from the New York Times, he said he changed his mind. He would now seek to overturn the Defense of Marriage Act. He would revisit the military's don't ask, don't tell policy. Who's believing this? I don't believe it. He has described himself repeatedly as pro-life. In an interview, however, he said, to describe me as pro-life is just wrong. I'm personally pro-choice and legislatively pro-choice. Who's believing any of this? Now, so does that mean you're going to abandon your position on partial birth abortion and parental notification? No, of course not. Still against partial birth abortion, and that's not the problem. The problem is, do you take the health of the mother into account or not? And he's on the Republican position where they say that's not relevant, okay? Parental choice you can disagree with, that's fine. He supported congressional legislation in 2006 to allow local police officers to investigate and arrest illegal immigrants. When asked about that, hey, wait a minute, that seems kind of crazy, right? Federal officials investigating illegal immigrants makes sense. If you empower the local cops to do it, it's going to be a mess. And people are going to, much more importantly, people are going to be afraid to go to the cops when there's a problem. If a woman has been abused, et cetera, et cetera. If they're illegal immigrants, they got shot at. They don't want to go to the police because the police are going to turn them in, right? Mayor Bloomberg's against it. Cory Booker's against it in Newark. So all of a sudden, Harold Ford has an evolving view of that issue. He says, quote, I have come to better understand this issue. Everything about this guy is super fake. Let me give you at least one more on the issues. Asked about his own experience with guns, because he's like pro-guns, but New York is not pro-guns, Tennessee is, right? So now he's running in New York. He said he was an occasional bird hunter. But he did give this funny quote, I shoot at things that can't shoot back and will continue to do that. Well, that just about nails it, okay? Now, let's get to my favorite part. Okay, which is, who is Harold Ford really running for? What's he trying to represent here? Why is he bothering to run to the right of Gillibrand, right? It's because Harold Ford Jr. took a job as a banker at Merrill Lynch, being paid at least $1 million a year. And he explains that he's going to be independent of the other Democrats and that he's his own man. In fact, he says, if I'm elected senator from New York, Harry Reid will not instruct me how to vote. Okay, that sounds positive. But he says people around him say that he should run. Now, remember, he works at Merrill Lynch, and throughout the article, they reference different executives he's hanging out with, right? And now here's a quote from the New York Times. Mr. Ford has been emboldened by the response he had received from the public in recent days. Everyone, from the cab drivers who shuttle him around the city to the executives with whom he rubs elbows on Wall Street, has urged him to run, he said. You don't say the other executives at Wall Street encouraged you to run? Huh. That's surprising. I can't wait to see what you think we should do with the financial bailouts. That's coming up in a little bit. And the cab drivers. The cab drivers know the difference between Gillibrand and Harold Ford Jr. Oh, he used to be in Tennessee. I'm not putting down cab drivers. They know a lot of stuff, right? And if the guy's in your cab, what are you going to be like? Don't run. I like Gillibrand. No, you're going to. That's not. It's such BS, okay? So let's get to it. What does Harold Ford really want to do? Quote, he called for a major reduction in the corporate tax rate. Oh, interesting how everybody on Wall Street is encouraging him to run, and it turns out you want to lower the corporate tax rate. I didn't see that coming. And a payroll tax holiday to encourage hiring. Oh, of course, to encourage hiring. Sure. And it turns out that he's beating up Gillibrand for opposing the taxpayer bailout of the financial industry. He says the bailout is fantastic. He says, quote, it was a mistake, referring to our vote. How can you be against ensuring the lifeblood of our city and your state, make sure that it survives, right? So just like Rudy Giuliani, Harold Ford Jr. is telling us that the Wall Street bailouts were the lifeblood of New York City and New York State. I know the financial industry is there, right? But God, this guy would sell out in a gigantic way to Wall Street. That's the whole point of his run. Here we go again. He explained that, here's a great little part from the New York Times article first. He says, on many days, he is driven to an NBC television studio in a chauffeured car. But Mr. Ford said he takes the subway only occasionally in the winter to avoid the cold when he cannot hail a cab. Is he not merciful? From time to time, he will actually get down among the people in the subway when it's cold and he can't get a cab. He says, okay, I'll do it for you. So now he's chauffeured around everywhere. You think that's bad? Well, this is, and look, if he's rich, he wants to get chauffeured around, I get it. But to pretend that you're a common man is a joke. Here you go. Mr. Ford said he objected to executive compensation on Wall Street, quote, to capping the executive compensation. I'm a capitalist. I believe that people take risks, and there are rewards if you do well, and they should lose if they don't. Except when they lost, we gave them the bailout, and you love the bailout. So you don't believe the last part of that sentence at all. All you believe is no caps on executive compensation because you and your executive friends don't like it. All right, now, they said, hey, you know what? Have you even been in the 5 boroughs? You know, you want to run in New York, you know, within the city of New York. Have you been to the 5 boroughs? And this is precious. Asked whether he had visited all 5 boroughs, he mentioned taking a helicopter ride across the city with fellow executives. No, you're done, son. You're done, okay? He doesn't get it. Look, he continues. But Mr. Ford said that, he said, look, I've been to the other boroughs. Staten Island, I'm a little fishy on. He says, quote, the only place I've not spent considerable time is Staten Island. But he did add, I landed there in the helicopter, so I can say yes. All right. Let me give you one last one, if all of that was not enough for you. Oh, by the way, he says, his slogan is going to be, Harold Ford, nobody's man but ours. Go. Nobody's man but Wall Street's. Let's keep it real. That's the reality of it. Okay. And finally, oh yeah, here it is. He has breakfast most mornings at the Regency Hotel on Park Avenue, and he receives regular pedicures. He described them as treatment for a foot condition. Come on. Please. Exit stage right. Okay. Dude, you can't get pedicures and pretend, oh, I'm for the little guy. Oh, yeah, I know. Wall Street is encouraging me to run. They gave me a whole bunch of money to run because they don't want, their compensation limited. But look, the pedicures are for a foot condition. Come on. Now, look, so if you had any thought of supporting Harold Ford Jr., don't make that mistake, okay? He's not interested in you. He's interested in the Wall Street guys. All right, now we move forward. Now let's go to Sarah Palin. Okay, you know what? Let me give you a quick taste of Sarah Palin. Then we'll come back for more later. We'll come back for the main meal. All right, the hearings are happening now. We got this financial commission going on, and I got more on that later as well. And some people thinking, it's not really going very well. So Glenn Beck is going to ask Sarah Palin about what she thinks of the Fed. Well, this should be instructive. I'm very curious as to what Sarah Palin thinks of the Fed. So let's go to clip number 9 and find out.
you see that the Fed made Exxon had their record profit a couple of years ago was $45 billion. The Fed just had record profit, over $50 billion. Nobody's having hearings on the Fed. Nobody is looking for a windfall profit tax on the Fed. Nobody seems to. We can't even open the Fed's books.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the Fed?
It's so ironic there too, especially that you bring up this private sector company, Exxon, because in Alaska we saw what was going on with Exxon, and we did have our own hearings on what was going on with this private sector company, and how could the state of Alaska adjust some things to make sure that there was a share of the resource. Yet you're right, nobody has even lifted a finger to go that route with the Fed. And it's a scary thing. It's one of those things that we're thankful for, Glenn, that you're bringing this to light. And I don't know anybody else who is. Certainly nobody else who has a platform or the megaphone like you do.
Well, he just gave you a chance to speak on that megaphone about what you think of the Fed. He didn't ask you about Exxon and Alaska. I know you got your index card on that. What do you think about the Fed? Here's her response, basically. She doesn't know the answer to a goddamn thing, okay? She's just winging it. And so she's like, okay, what pre-prepared answer can I fill in this slot? You know, it's ironic that you bring up the Exxon and the private corporations. First of all, he didn't know. What's ironic about it? I don't understand what you mean by ironic in that case, okay? And he wasn't really asking you about private corporations and Exxon. He was asking about the Fed. And you got to give Glenn Beck credit there. That was a good question, and I agree with him. I agree with him. Should we look at the Fed's books? Absolutely. So, Sarah, what's your opinion? Should we look at the Fed's books? It's ironic that you mentioned that because I'm going to avoid the question. Pathetic as usual. You think that's bad? Wait till you get a load of what she had to say about the Founding Fathers. Have you seen this yet? Oh, you're going to love this. That's a little later in the program. Young Turks.
Don't feel like being lonely tonight. See, I want some.
Welcome to the Young Turks. I am your host, Cenk Uygur. J.R. Jackson's producing and Jesus Godoy is directing. We've got a fun hour ahead for you guys. I want to touch on two topics that we're going to come back to with guests in a second. First is the Financial Crisis Commission. That was in its second day today. We're going to have Bill Black on the program. And he's the one that regulated after the S&L crisis and one of the top economists and regulators in the country. And, of course, he's not on the commission, which drives me crazy, but he's going to comment on it today for us. And so far, the reviews of the commission in those first 2 days are not positive. Michael Hirsch of Newsweek saying huge opportunities being missed. Most of the questions are pillow soft, he called them. And, you know, we had some decent questions from Angelides that I got excited about in the first day to Goldman Sachs CEO Blankfein. And then today there were some bright moments. Let me just quickly tell you what they were. Again, Angelides saying to the FBI, in this case, Eric Holder, of course, who's the Attorney General now, he's asking him, hey, listen, the FBI warned in 2004 about this mortgage fraud. So what I want to know is what did they do after that warning? How many people did they put on the cases? What did you guys do to stop the mortgage fraud that you knew was coming? And now, of course, Holder was not the Attorney General at the time, but he's the head of the division now. And so he said, all right, well, I will definitely, investigate that and come back to you. So that's positive. And then the SEC chair, Mary Shapiro, who's a smart and tough woman, and I was glad she got that position, laid out 7 different things that they should do to make regulations more sound. I think those were good suggestions, so I was encouraged by that. And then Sheila Blair is one of the people who got it right in the first place, who warned about the deregulation. She's now the head of the FDIC, and she also nailed the problem right. She was also a witness today. She said the problem is that we have perverse incentives for risky behavior and that the system is based on short-term results. Let me give you one quote from her. Formula-driven compensation allows high short-term profits to be translated into generous bonus payments without regard to any long-term risks. That's exactly right. Short-term risks leads to big bonuses for the executives. They take the bonuses home, and then in the long term, those risks blow up, but they're not responsible for them, and the money in those corporations are not theirs, so they don't really care. So she's definitely accurately diagnosed the problem. Now, the problem with the commission overall appears to be that they had, and they have Brooksley Born on the commission. She's also one of the people who warned about the impending dangers, probably the most qualified person on the commission. First of all, as Hirsch points out, she's asking questions last. Why? No one knows. But she said in the beginning, hey, no, let's do the legwork first. Let's bring in the mid-level executives. Let's bring in documents. Let's bring in the data. And once we have all that, then bring the CEOs in and ask them questions based on the knowledge we already acquired about, hey, why did you do this wrong? Why did you do that, et cetera. And, of course, as happened before, no one listened to Brooksley Born. So they said, no, we're going to bring in the CEOs first, and we're going to do a big splash to CEOs here, and we're holding them accountable. They asked one or two good questions, and the rest of it was patty cakes. And the CEOs were like, this was the big, tough questions? Big deal. So they've already bungled that. We'll talk to Bill Black about it, see, his thoughts on it, because it's obviously a little discouraging, because we were hoping that maybe, just hope against hope, that this commission could actually figure out what went wrong so they could fix it. Not the commission itself, but give recommendations that Congress would act on. All right. Now, also on health care, we're going to have a guest on that in a little bit, but I want to tell you one interesting and one important thing. The interesting thing first, Harry Reid came out yesterday and said, oh my God, Joe Lieberman double-crossed me, and I didn't see it coming. Really, you didn't see that coming from Lieberman? He said, I thought we had to compromise with the Medicare buy-in because Lieberman is the one who suggested it, like 3 months ago. And he didn't object when I said, all right, does this compromise make sense? And everybody said, yeah, it makes sense. Lieberman wrote a letter saying, hey, you know what, I'm not 100% positive, but he didn't object in the letter at all. And then when he came time to make the decision, boom, he cut his legs out from underneath him and said, I'm not doing this deal. I love that Harry Reid is surprised by that. How can you be surprised by that? But, I figured out something that the reporters did not report on. Why? Because they asked the question, but they didn't answer. The question is, why did Lieberman not even wait, as some of the other Democratic senators complained, for the bill to get to be brought over to the Congressional Budget Office so that it could get, rated, is one way of putting it, okay? And that means the Congressional Budget Office says, hey, here's how much it's going to cost, or here's how much money it's going to save. Because the private insurance companies panicked and realized, hey, you know what? This compromise with the Medicare buy-in, it might actually save a lot of money to the American people. If they find that out after the CBO releases its numbers, it'll be harder to defeat it. So, Joe, I know you were going to be our boy later, but we need you to step up and be our boy now, because we can't let the American people find out how much money they're going to save. That's why Lieberman double-crossed Harry Reid earlier than expected and said, no, I'm not going to go to this compromise, right? So that part is interesting because of the interplay and how Reid was taken by surprise and still naively believes that Lieberman is acting in good faith, which I find astounding. But the second part of it is also a little devastating. Exactly as we suspected, Reid actually, beyond my expectations in the beginning, said, when he first found out about Lieberman, he was like, all right, well, then let's not do the deal. Because we got to stand our ground at some point, and I can't believe that this guy's going back on this, then no deal, right? Guess who changed his mind? This is the unsurprising part. Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel calls Harry Reid into a meeting and says, shut up and do what Lieberman tells you to do. And so Harry's like, well, how am I going to fight this fight without the White House backing me, without the 60 votes, et cetera, et cetera? He couldn't do it, so then they had to go with Lieberman's, exactly what Lieberman wanted, because Rahm Emanuel and the president and the whole White House chose sides with Lieberman and not Reid. Look, I hate to do it to you, but those are the realities. Now, we do have slightly good news. Actually, it depends on how you take it. So, I told you that the unions were going to go in there with a couple of lead pipes and a blowtorch to make sure that the House stood up for the excise tax and taking that out, which is in the Senate side. In other words, how do you raise money for this Medicare healthcare reform fix? Sorry. And the way you raise it in the House side is through taxing the 1% wealthiest. The way you raise it on the Senate side is you tax the middle class by taxing good healthcare policies. So union made a stand, and they got a deal today, and they think the White House is on board, it appears, and they think the House and the Senate are going to be on board. And so what's the deal? Did they get rid of the excise tax? Well, no, they didn't, right? So that's the bad news. The good news is It applies to less people because now they brought it up from if you're a family and you have health insurance worth $23,000, that's where it was going to begin. Now it begins at $24,000. So it applies to slightly higher insurance plans. So it's going to hit slightly wealthier people, although a lot of those people are still very much middle class. But the main concession that the union got was that their members will be exempt for 8 years. So if you're part of a union and you already negotiated your health care, you're exempt for 8 years from this. Here's what's going to happen. The Republicans and the conservative talk show hosts are going to scream bloody murder about that. Number one, the rest of us got thrown under a bus. Okay? If you're not part of a union health care plan already, this compromise doesn't help you at all. Okay? If you are part of a union, yes, it definitely helps you for the next 8 years. But it brings the cost savings from $150 billion for this particular tax to only $90 billion. So you know what the conservative talk shows are going to say. You heard it here first. Now you will hear it for the next several weeks. The Rush Limbaughs, et cetera, of the world will say, you see, the unions got paid off $60 billion. But the reality is they didn't. They already had those plans. Okay, they're just going to get taxed on those plans like the rest of us later. Now, look, if they got $60 billion in their pocket and we didn't, I'd be pissed about that. I'm not part of that group, right? And am I happy about this thing? Not really. I mean, it's a little bit of a compromise. Wow, right? But it's just that they didn't get screwed as hard as the rest of us got screwed. Okay, that's what they negotiated. So it'll be misleading, their charges, but they set themselves up for that charge. And the funny thing is, the union didn't ask for this. The union asked for it to apply to everybody. And one of the reasons they asked for that is because they said, look, the conservatives are going to rip your head off with this, right? And the Obama White House insisted, no, only the unions. It's bad politics, man. It's bad politics and not very good policy. And in the end, for the rest of us, the excise tax remains, although it's a little better. And, they got dental and vision excluded. At the end of all this, the big compromise is we got dental and vision excluded. I mean, it seems like a joke. Anyway, all right, let's go on to Sarah Palin. We'll come back to both those issues. So Sarah Palin is on Glenn Beck's program, and she does something startling. She makes Glenn Beck look kind of smart. I watched a huge portion of this, and from time to time you're like, well, Beck is actually making a decent point, and wow, Palin is so much dumber than Beck. And that's shocking. Now, the first clip we're going to give you is a classic. It's about the Founding Fathers. And now, in this case, Beck at one point calls her out, and I'm like, hey, look at that. And then he goes back to, stroking her in massive ways. That sounds like fun, right? Okay, so let's go to clip number 11.
I have to tell you that every time I bring up your name and somebody says, who's out there? I answer one of two ways. I'm waiting for George Washington to appear. And then it's usually followed by your name. And I say, but I don't know. And it's not I don't know if you're smart enough. I find this insulting. Your kids must find that extraordinarily insulting when they hear that.
Sad day.
It's not that you're not capable or anything else. I don't know. I don't know. I can't give my trust out to anybody anymore. Yeah. Every time you do, they burn you. Yeah. Every time you're like, oh.
It's because we have a fallen world and mankind has fallen, and we can never put. I don't believe that we were created to be able to put our faith wholly, solely, except for our spouse, in another person. Certainly not in a politician. I don't believe that. Except, looking back on our founding fathers and seeing the sincerity there, the genuine love that they had of country, I don't think in recent days we can find too many of those politicians.
That's why we got to stop looking and stop taking from the barrel and start picking from the tree. Who's your favorite founder?
Well, all of them, because they came collectively together with so much
bullcrap.
Diverse,
who's your favorite?
So much diverse opinion and so much diversity in terms of belief, but collectively they came together to form this union. No, and they were led by, of course, George Washington. So he's got to rise to the top. was the consummate statesman. He served, he returned power to the people. He didn't want to be a king. He returned power to the people. Then he went back to Mount Vernon. He went back to his farm. He was almost reluctant to serve as president, too. And that's who you need to find to serve in government, in a bureaucracy, those who you know will serve for the right reasons because they're reluctant to get out there and seek a limelight and seek power. They're doing it for the people. That was George Washington.
He's my favorite for that reason as well. He was the indispensable man. And that's why I say I'm waiting for George Washington to appear. Someone who doesn't want to serve, but will because he must. And someone who's so beyond question that he can bring people together and say, look, we got to do this. This is going to be hard.
That's exactly what we need to seek in a candidate. Someone, I'll repeat this, almost reluctant to serve. Someone who will not prostitute themselves and say what they believe a voter wants to hear at that time in order to get elected. But someone whom the people find and ask, will you sacrifice, will you do this for our country to get us back on the right track?
That is why I think you're on the most admired list. Because some people find you to be that. Because you came out of the blue, and you did serve, you were asked to serve, and you got butchered, and you continually get butchered, and yet you're still going.
Yeah. Okay. That is why you're on the most admired list, because you just repeated what I said twice. Oh, you are so reluctant to serve, but you did it anyway. Do you know Sarah Palin's history? Does Beck know it at all? She wasn't reluctant to serve at all. She jumped into politics. And then we have several of her mentors who said, as soon as I turned around, she slit my throat and took my position. What the hell's reluctant to serve about Sarah Palin? The only reason she's reluctant to serve is because when she thought she could make a lot of money, she's like, well, I'm reluctant to serve as governor. I got to get out of here, man. I'll see you guys later. Time to cash in at Fox News. Comparing her to George Washington? Glenn, are you serious? Are you serious? Sarah Palin is the George Washington of today. And, of course, let's get to it, man. That was embarrassing in the middle. Who's your favorite founding father? All of them. I mean, even Glenn Beck called bullcrap on that. Did you hear him? He just literally said bullcrap. And then she's like, what's the one he mentioned earlier? What was it? Right, George Washington. I gotta say, George Washington, because he was the leader. She sounds like a third grader. Look, Beck, I have my issues with, but in other parts of the interview, he quoted Thomas Paine, etc. He knows his founding fathers. He picked Washington because he likes Washington. Are you convinced she picked Washington because she thinks that he was better than Thomas Paine or Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson or any of the other ones for substantive reasons? Are you convinced you could name any other one? All of them? No, come on, man. Come on, please, people, snap out of it. And, you know, your name comes up all the time, Glenn says. But I don't know. I'm not quite convinced you're George Washington yet. Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. You're very open-minded. And then the nonsense about mankind is fallen. And, you know, we live in a fallen world. I know it's the religious imagery that people love, you know, on that side, right? What it has to do with the answers, I have no idea. And then finally they say, hey, you know what, she gets butchered all the time. She gets butchered because when you ask her who's her favorite founding father, she has no effing idea. Man, they think these are tough interviews, right? I mean, not Glenn Beck. She stumbles even in the easiest interview, right? But Kirk, etc. Sit her down here. Let's see what we get. Really, you like Thomas Jefferson? Okay, tell me 2 things about Thomas Jefferson. 2 things. Inconceivable she would get it. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Would be the answer. All of them. That would be the answer. Okay. All right. Anyway, we're not done with her yet. Let me at least do one more here. Apparently, they're having trouble recognizing the country. I don't understand their worldview. Let's go to clip number 10.
Is universal health care constitutional?
I don't believe that it is constitutional. I believe that it violates the 10th Amendment. I believe it usurps states' rights. I believe that it is, aside from the unconstitutional aspect of this, I think it is the most wrong-headed thing that Obama is trying to cram down our throat. And I cannot believe, I know that people are outraged about it, but I cannot believe that those on Capitol Hill are still not listening to the outrage of the people and still want to see this thing get crammed down our throat.
You have to ask yourself why. They're all throwing themselves on the altar of this. The bribes, the corruption, the coercion, the SEIU, break your kneecaps kind of
Who's breaking
stuff.
kneecaps? Who?
I said a year ago, it was a year ago Christmas, a year from now, you will not recognize your country. Put yourself back a year ago last Christmas. Go into a coma. Wake up.
Please.
Do you recognize your country?
Already, this change is creating this unrecognizable system that we're a part of. But yeah, with the especially with the health care, when incumbents are even willing to give up their power, their seat, when they're saying, hey, if it costs me my seat in Congress, it costs me my seat in Congress. I'm going to cram this thing through anyway. That's a scary, scary thing to consider.
It's not if they're doing it on principles. It is if they're doing it for bribes, money, power, position.
I want to know what their principles are then. I want to know why they think that this is principled at all.
Exactly right.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Except I didn't agree with your earlier statement, but nonetheless. And the whole interview is so comical because it's like so weighty. Tell me why you're George Washington. Tell me about states' rights. Okay, look, first of all, they can't recognize the country. Like if you woke up a year later, he's saying like today, you can't recognize the country. Really? It looks pretty similar to me. You really can't recognize this country from a year ago. That's your claim? I find that astounding. That's still the same Carl's Jr. down the street. I got the same crappy Pontiac Grand Am I'm driving. You don't recognize this country. And finally, look, let me just, two quick things on this. One, the SEIU breaking kneecaps. Are you kidding me? They got no card check. They got no public option. In the end, they got dental and vision. That's breaking kneecaps. They got a dental and vision exemption. And then the states' rights argument is such horse crap. Under that 10th Amendment argument, you can say every single law passed by the Congress is unconstitutional, okay? That's not a real argument against what they're doing. They're grasping at straws. Bush said, here it says in the 4th Amendment, I must have a warrant for a search and seizure. And he went like this, okay? I no longer need a warrant for searches and seizures. There's your 4th Amendment. They never complained about it. Never, okay? Now they're going to the 10th Amendment, and it's vaguely against states' rights for Congress to do anything. What a bunch of frauds. Young Turks. Thanks for watching the video podcast. And, of course, if you become a member on theyoungturks.com, you can get the whole 3-hour show.
Plus an uncensored postgame show.
Those are fun. Young Turks.